Today, I want to tell you guys a story. I want to tell you the story of my toxic love-hate relationship with Jason X. Hey, what is up, everybody? It's Nick here from the Lost River Drive-In, and from the intro, you can tell we're talking about Jason X today. Now, from that intro, you might be thinking, oh, toxic love-hate relationship? Is this a movie that you love but also hate at the same time? Not exactly. See, I wanted to tell you guys a story about Jason X, about my experience with Jason X and how this movie has ranged from all the way to here, down here, up here for me over the years, because it's been quite a roller coaster ride when it comes to me and Jason X. So from the ripe age of 9 or 10 years old, my best friend Tommy had Jason X on DVD. Now, he had a lot of the Friday the 13th movies on DVD, but this is the one that he wanted to watch the most and that we wanted to watch the most. And I remember the first time I watched Jason X, there was something about the movie to me. See, I hadn't seen most of the Friday the 13th movies at that point, and I was a kid. So, you're giving me Space Terminator Jason, androids, machine guns, boobies. I was in. I was all in from the very beginning. And I remember we wore this DVD out. This was a movie that we watched once a week, pausing at stuff just to laugh at it or rewinding for certain scenes just to see them another time. But no matter what the scene was or what the subject matter of that scene was, we couldn't help but finding ourselves going back to this movie time and time again and scenes from this movie time and time again. Now, Jason X, I'd seen it, I'd loved it, I'd seen it a million times. Years went on, I became a teenager and a young adult, and I started to get this sense about me at times where I was like, oh, these movies are stupid. Not just Jason X, but a lot of movies like that. A lot of schlocky slasher movies I was kind of turning away from. I don't know if it was the pressures of being on the Halloween message board where there were a lot of pretentious folks on there talking about how this movie sucks, and it was almost right before the elevated horror era really started, but you could see the seeds of it being laid. And I feel like at that time, I was falling victim to voices around me, people saying that this movie is bad. And then I started to see it that way. I was like, you know what? Some of these effects are bad. Some of these jokes are bad. Some of this makes no sense whatsoever. And then I didn't watch it for a while. And I even did a video when I rebranded my channel 3 years ago of my least favorite horror movies, and Jason X was on the list. Now, fast forward 3 years later, having watched it a couple more times and one time on the podcast with Christian, guys, I am happy to say I love Jason X. 9, 10-year-old Nick was absolutely right with how he felt about Jason X. This movie rules, and let me tell you exactly why. Now, for every reason that someone can state as to why they love Jason X, it is just as equally valid a reason for someone to say they hate Jason X. This movie definitely is a product of its time. It definitely suffers from not a big enough budget. It definitely suffers from studio meddling, and it just really, really takes you back to the late 90s, early 2000s. And there were a lot of bad horror movies in that frame of time. So it's not at all surprising to see a lot of those things that were prevalent around that time in this movie. But those, to me, as I've gotten older, are reasons why I love the movie. And some of those reasons are the bad CGI. Look, there's some truly heinous space stuff in this movie. But am I going to hold it against the movie necessarily? No. It was a really unique idea. Send Jason into space. This hadn't been done in Friday the 13th or Nightmare or Halloween at that point. So of the big three, he was the first one to break that ground outside of our atmosphere. That's cool. That's a big deal. They worked with what they could. Are there some bad, cringy late 90s jokes in here? Absolutely. One involving a gigantic screw. But honestly, it just endears me more to the movie. Because again, it takes you back to that time. A lot of these things that I'm mentioning, like I said, are very prevalent in that era of film. And I guess I'm kind of partial to it because that was the era that I was a child. So I saw that stuff at young, impressionable ages. And I just thought, well, that's just the way it is. It's the way the world is. People talk this way. Movies look this way. I just got desensitized to it because it's what I always saw. The plot in and of itself, or the lack thereof, is problematic for a lot of people too. But I guess the way I look at Jason X is simply like, this movie was made to just kind of break barriers within this franchise and really get weird. I've got to shout out Todd Farmer because a lot of his movies get shit on because he's simply just, he's juvenile in a lot of ways. His dialogue, he's a big kid, but he had some really cool ideas. And actually the final product for Jason X isn't exactly what he had written. There was a lot changed. And I think the initial idea and the just genesis of this film was actually pretty solid. But I think that it was ahead of its time in a lot of ways. With the 10th movie in the Friday the 13th franchise taking us to space, I guess I just didn't need some kind of mind-bending plot. I didn't need something that was really going to make me question things and make me anticipate a sequel to get all these unanswered questions answered. I just didn't feel that way. Now, granted, when I saw it, I wasn't in that frame of mind because I was a kid. I just wanted to watch a fun movie. But even now as an adult, now that I've come back around to the film in recent years and accepted it for what it is, I love it for that. And it's very similar to a movie I talked about not long ago on my channel, Halloween Kills, a movie that really knows what it is and goes for it. See, if Jason X were a movie that truly felt like it was highbrow, and it was really trying to deliver something that it felt was going to be talked about for generations to come, that it was going to make you ponder things and question life itself, if this movie was really going to break down the barriers of horror films and really make us go, wow, are we not taking these things seriously enough, then I would have a problem with it. But Jason X is not that at all. Jason X adds a bunch of corny comedy in it, it has a bunch of wonky effects, and it has really a plot that doesn't need to make sense because it's literally just about how can we get Jason into space. Obviously, we go way forward in time. He's been frozen. He's now on this space station. He comes alive. And, by the way, delivers one of the best kills in the franchise. Okay? Like, I'm sorry, the dry ice face smash, freaking incredible. And I remember as a child being like, dude, that was gnarly. I didn't even know what dry ice was at the time. But I was like, that was gnarly. A bunch of meaningless stuff happens throughout the movie. There's a lot of filler. You know, we've got experimentation with VR, which is kind of fun, even if the effects aren't great. We've got an android that's nipples fall off, which is fun and hilarious and totally unneeded, but I loved it. But all of that is to get us to a third act that I don't care what anybody says. I don't care how many times people shit on the look of Uber Jason or the third act of this movie. I just won't hear it. That is awesome. See, at the same age I saw this movie for the first time, I was big on the Terminator movies. And this movie was like that third act. When we get Uber Jason, I immediately thought of the Terminator. I was just like, oh my God, he's the Terminator now. This is incredible. Arnold Schwarzenegger's going to be under the mask. I didn't necessarily think that, but I don't know. I was a kid. And I just remember being like, that shot of Jason in the hallway, when he finally gets the upgrade, I was like, yes, yes, yes. You get this simulated reality of the two camp counselors or teenagers, you know, wanting to get high and have sex, and then he's just beating them against the trees in the sleeping bags, which is also one of my favorite moments in the entire series. Like, yes, let's not talk about Jason getting sucked in the vacuum of space. Yeah, it's kind of stupid. It looks bad. But regardless, everything I'm talking about, this incessant rambling that I'm going on about this movie, like I said, I totally understand. All of these things I mentioned are valid reasons to hate this movie. They're also valid reasons to love this movie. So how did I go from love, hate, love over a span of 20 years? Well, like I said, as a kid, I just really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a blast, and that's all I was really looking for as a kid. As a teenager and young adult, I thought it was stupid. I thought, oh my God, this is not sophisticated enough. I was listening to outside voices and forces that were almost kind of telling me that I was wrong for liking the movie. And you don't want to be that guy that's like, you know what, I like it. And then I became an adult, and I got into my mid to late 20s, and I said, I don't give a shit if it's weird that I like something that a lot of people don't like. And what's interesting about that is, as time has gone on, a lot of people have really embraced Jason X for all of the things I mentioned. And because it broke the mold. It was different. Sure, had other franchises gone to space at that point with middling at best results? Of course. But it didn't matter. This was Jason. Sending Jason, Freddy, or Michael Myers into space is different than any other horror character going to space. Yeah, the Leprechaun went there. Cool. Awesome. Pinhead did go there, and I loved that movie. But just like that movie, The technology wasn't there yet, and these horror movies didn't have the budgets, I should say, is probably the main reason why they couldn't make the space stuff look good. But it doesn't mean we can't appreciate the attempt at doing something vastly different. And the fact that this movie exists, the fact that this movie got made, and let me tell you something, it almost didn't come out. It sat on a shelf for a long time before they finally dumped it into theaters, after it had already just been ripped illegally to a bunch of people that could pirate it before it ever even came out into theaters. They still dropped it into the theaters, and that in and of itself is a triumph. Because when you look back on these franchises, and you look back at some of these oddball releases and these oddball movies, none of them stand out like Jason X to me. None of them are as wildly different as Jason X is to the Friday the 13th franchise. And you could make an argument for Halloween 3, but that is in and of itself kind of separate, you know, because Michael Myers isn't in the movie aside from the commercial. And it's like, I don't know, I guess it's technically not in universe because that's a movie in that. So the fact that this is not only in universe and canon, but it's literally that character going into space, getting a totally, new upgrade. It's just mind-blowing to me that this movie even exists. And I feel like if you are at all like me and you've been on a journey with this movie for decades now, where you've struggled with it, where you've had a love-hate relationship, where you maybe have felt like people have told you you're wrong for loving or hating this movie, embrace it, man. Embrace the weirdness that is Jason X. Embrace the fact that this movie dared to do what Michael and Freddy still have not dared to do. Embrace it. And at the end of the day, not only did it dare to do those things and do them, it did them to, I think, resounding results. The movie is a freaking blast. But I want to hear what you guys think about Jason X. And I'm not talking about like just tell me, oh yeah, I love it or I hate it. No. I want to hear about your journey with the movie. When you first saw it, what did you think about Jason X? And where do you sit with it now? And in those in-between years, did you have any times like me where you fell out of love with it or maybe started to fall in love with it after not liking it? I want to hear your journey with Jason X down below in the comments section. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Leave a like on it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks for stopping at the drive-in. This is Nick, and I'm pulling out.